And one thing that's impressive about Flagship is the money you raised. And as you said, it's expensive. And to build 106 companies, the last fund you raised was in July. I think it was one of the largest funds ever raised, was 2.6 billion.
It is a lot. We have now $14 billion under committed capital. We have the fund 8 of the 2.6 you mentioned, and the special fund together with that on $1 billion as well, another $1 billion.
You start counting in billions.
Yes. I truly think that machine learning and AI is now in the place where you can revolutionize how we think about drug development. Already from the very beginning, being in an environment with a lot of support and a lot of very talented people, as many, I would say, female as male, role models.
Bienvenue to a new episode. Yeah, as Michelle said, this episode is a bit special. It's the first time we do it on stage live. Thanks for the partnership with BioEurope. So I'm your host, Philip, and on the Flood Bio Show, I'm interviewing the best Europeans in biotech to help you grow. One of the best VCs in the world, and I think many will agree, is Flagship Pioneering. They're based in Boston, but they recently expanded geographically and opened a European office. So it's a pleasure to have Lovisa today on the show and on stage. And for today, we will talk about Flagship, but especially on the European operation. We will also talk about company building at large and Lovisa's journey into becoming one of the best Swedish leaders in biopharma. Just a quick practical thing. I will try to open to questions. I want to do it like interactive. We are live here, so we can enjoy that. Someone will have a mic, and I will open it throughout the discussion. So please don't be shy. It's a close community. So please give a round of applause to Lovisa. Right.
Hi.
Welcome to the show and welcome to the stage, Lovisa.
Thank you so much for having me here.
So cool.
Yeah, looks great.
So let's start with the European initiatives of Flagship. So you open in, technically you're in Cambridge, US, Cambridge, Massachusetts, and you open in Cambridge, UK. Can you just start with like how things are going?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. So as you mentioned in your intro, Flagship is a venture creation company, right? And it is different from most other venture caps in that, yes, we do raise funds, but we really build our companies and originate them ourselves. And that's a very creative process. It is really about tapping into ecosystems around the world. How do we find the best collaborators? How do we stay abreast of the science that we want to work with? And I think that's the core reason for why we have now started 2 different offices, both in UK as well in Singapore, so that we can tap into that ecosystem and be much closer to the science. Because really, science has no borders, and it's really about finding collaborations and finding the right people to work with.
And why the UK versus another part of Europe?
Well, I think it could be in many different places, and we could potentially expand to many others. It's Cambridge to Cambridge. It's easy, right? And it also is easy for us to then also collaborate with a broader European scene as well. In the case of, for example, Cambridge and UK, we had one of our launching events in the context of one of the companies, Apriori Bio, and we found a lot of good ways of interacting. That's a company in variant resilient vaccines,
Yeah.
and we found very good ways of interacting with local agencies, the CEPIs, the governments of UK, but also with local startups. So it's about finding areas where you have very strong sort of local presence.
And I guess as I discussed with someone yesterday, in Europe, when you're in the UK, you're very close to the rest of Europe. I guess it's the same for you guys also. In Singapore, you're very
close to the rest of the region, for sure.
Yeah. That's great. And I think you started one company, or Quotient, I think, out of the UK.
Exactly.
Can you talk a bit about that one as well?
I think that was a quite unique situation where there were some academic co-founders that were working on very similar types of biology, and it made a lot of sense to bring those together into the company Quotient. And actually, I think that's something that we sometimes do also in the context of Apriori Bio. We've also sort of worked very closely with key opinion leaders in the field.
Yeah.
And sometimes just it makes more sense to do it together as co-founders than others.
Nice. And can you, what is pretty impressive with you, since you joined Flagship, which I think was what, 4 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah. You launched 4 different biotechs, which is pretty, it's a lot. One is, and maybe can you talk quickly about them, like about the different falls and yeah.
Yep, absolutely happy to. So the companies that we founded over these last couple of years includes Alltrna, which is the world's first tRNA company, Apriori Bio, which is in variant resilient vaccines, Metaphore Biotechnologies, which is really about generative molecular design, and Prologue, which is tapping into the viral proteome. And I would say they are all in very different areas of biology, needless to say, and they're all platform companies, and they're all, I would say, in that interface between AI and machine learning and different types of biology. So how can we build platforms that allows us to parameterize the space that we're looking to understand and then apply machine learning to infer those learnings so that we can drive insights more quickly and get towards the best medicines for patients
Yeah.
as soon as possible, right?
Yeah. I think that's one thing that is quite special about Flagship as well. You are quite agnostic also on like on what's the application or you're looking at amazing science and then apply it. I mean, you're going to therapeutics, you have also industrial biotech,
Yeah.
biosolutions, but all within the same funds. So like,
Yeah.
I guess there must be also some challenges attached to it.
I think science is super creative, and we need to be abreast of all the different sort of areas that we could consider going into, and really, but it's a lot about thinking about what are the big problems where we want to create solution
What
towards.
if?
Yeah, what if? Exactly. What if we could deliver this and that? What if we could use tRNA to edit proteins? I mean, these big what if questions. To speak a little bit about the process, we apply a very sort of strong process for innovation, and that's how we can be sort of parallel entrepreneurs, because we apply that same process independent of what science it is that we're going after. And I think that's why we can go after such orthogonal topics, because we still always keep ourselves to the same standards when it comes to how we actually go after it. It's like we always want to go after the non-adjacencies. We want to go out in the white space. We want to be where others are not necessarily going, because it creates space for us to explore and invent and create IP early on, etc. And I think traditionally that's where, people say that's a lot of risk to go into those spaces, right? But we often think about it different. It's like a lot of uncertainty because no one has really been there. So you can't really know what the risk is if you haven't been there.
But it's an opportunity to be the first or first in class. Best.
Exactly. And it's also an opportunity to rapidly create the data points that are needed to bring down that uncertainty so that you actually understand the space better than anyone else. And then you can start assigning the risk and make a cognizant decision as to, is this worth going after? Or do I not have the insights that I need in order to feel confident that there is actually a path forward in what's otherwise pretty much white space?
Yeah. And one thing about the process as well is you're always investing almost the same amount, $50 million first check, fully from the flagship fund.
Yep.
Like why this amount? I mean, a lot of people here in the audience, I think, if a biotech CEO in Europe, they would dream about raising 50 million as a first seed Series A. Can you talk about why that amount? How you like?
Yeah. I mean, we start off with exploration. So every year we maybe run 100 different explorations where we ask these big what if questions. What if we could build variant resilient vaccines? What if, in the context of Moderna, you could use mRNA to produce protein therapeutics? And many of them won't go anywhere because you realize that it was a great idea. The time may not be right yet, or the technology is just not there yet to actually make it happen. But then sometimes you find these ideas where it's almost like maybe two different technologies coming together for the first time, and you see some synergies that you just had never thought about before. And that's when you start to form what we call a protocol. But it's a huge opportunity cost for us to actually move forward at that stage, to your point before. So we don't take that easily. Instead, we very explicitly decide on a couple of killer questions that we need to answer to move on to the next stage. And then we put a couple of $1 million first into what we call a protocol. And during this time, we recruit a couple of people to help us build the science. And at the end of that 9 to 12 months or so, we hopefully have answered those questions explicitly, so that we can say that we see that even though we don't know that much yet, we at least know that some of those core pieces that we need to put in place for the puzzle to come together seems viable. And that's when we start making that bigger investment to actually build out the platform and harden the platform, but then also start thinking about what are all the different potential areas of biology that we could point that platform towards and create prototypes from the platform, so that we can see the value creation and we can sort of see what value pools we can unlock. And really focus it towards what is the biggest unmet need and where do we want to go with it.
So I guess the 50 million is a total amount of the whole process, plus once you are going out of stealth mode.
Yeah, and that's something that comes completely from Flagship, right? And then when we get to basically Series B, that's when we start bringing in, first of all, an external CEO. I stay on as CEO until that stage. And together we raise the Series B, and then the CEO brings the company sort of to the next stage of development.
Yeah. That's nice. And I mean, I think I forgot to mention it in the intro, but I've followed Flagship since basically 2014. We talked about. I finished my studies in Boston. I met David Barry, Stefan from Moderna. And that's when Moderna was really taking off and was really originated at Flagship and taking off. And now, now we all know the story.
Yeah.
And we also know, the return you made on Moderna is insane. I don't know I heard it was like 100-fold or something. I don't know how you can disclose. But can you talk about the return as well on investing so early, and I guess having quite some equity as well? And what does it mean from the whole business model of Flagship? What does it allow you?
I mean, the business model of Flagship is really, as you well say, it's like really building it from the beginning ourselves. And I mean, that it's not the easiest way of doing things, for sure, because you kind of literally have to stay with it and sort of have that vision from the very beginning and work it ways backward. But as in comparison to if you bring in science from the outside or you invest in another company, we will always know what it is that we have in our hands because we built every single piece of it ourselves. And I think that is very, very useful as you're continuing to build the company. And the way the process is set up, we also have many of the same people following the companies throughout its lifetime. So even if it's a quite hard model as such, I think that is why we can also create the value because of being in it for the long run, because we are truly in it for the long run. We stay through the Series B, we stay through IPO, and these are our babies. We really stay with them for a very long time.
I like that, yeah. And maybe continue zooming out on the company building model. I think what's really interesting in this model, in Boston, you guys were one of the few who did that very well and quite early. I think Third Rock was another one, Atlas was another one, and it seems like the model also coming more and more also European VCs start to do that. I mean, Fabian Kurma did a startup studio. Fabian had one. I think Sophie Nova start companies from scratch as well. Like, can you talk a bit on on the model itself? On more, I mean, I'm curious on like, why are other VCs, I don't know, copying you, inspired from you, and like, why so much?
I mean, it's so oftentimes, for example, when you join a company, you have looked at it from the outside and you've been really impressed with what it is that you see. That's why you decide to join the company. I must say that when I joined Flagship back in 2020, it was so much more than I had ever thought of. So we're now at, I think the last company I founded was Flagship 107. So it's like there are a lot of companies that come in this way. So I think what Flagship has really managed to do is to build a ecosystem of very, parallel entrepreneurs. We know how to build companies, and we have now so many scientists that come from very different walks of lives within the context of Flagship. And we know how to build platforms, and we do it repeatedly, and in parallel. And those are learnings that I think a lot of people also look at as inspiration. It takes some time to build up that that knowledge base, if I may say, but it is great to be in such an environment, because if you see everyone else sort of being able to build new companies and create new companies, all of a sudden it lowers the threshold for you yourself to actually come up and create your new companies, because you see it's possible with the support of the teams that you have there.
Yeah. And what do you think about especially in Boston, there is Apriori Bio and kind of the whole like founder-led movement of like now pharma therapeutics and in life sciences, VCs create the companies and there's no really like true biotech founder.
Yeah.
And like they want to bring more like scientist founders or founders from outside who get financed and who get like incubated. What do you think about that movement or that critique? I feel like it's a bit a critique of the VC origination model. Like,
I mean, I find it hard to tell because it's very different from the Flagship model in that we are both, the founders, the scientific founders and the company founders. And that is very different. So it's hard for me to sort of relate too much to the other types of models when you don't know them so well, right? But I do see the benefits of and the joy and of actually being both.
you were founder yourself.
You stand at that whiteboard and you come up with the ideas together with your team as to what you really feel passionate about, where you think that you can actually make an impact. And then you have all that support from the ecosystem to actually push that forward and build companies out of it.
So, I mean, I think at the end, the two models are great models and it fits for different people as well and different science and different cases.
And all we want is to have as much innovation as possible to create the best medicines, because there is just there's so much unmet need. So we should just try many different ways of getting to it and take inspiration for what you see works, right?
Yeah. That's good. And I think, and one thing also that's impressive about Flagship is the money you raised in the funds. I mean, and as you said, it's expensive to run and to build 106 company. And the last fund you raised was in July. I think was one of the largest funds ever raised. Was 2.6 billion for one single venture fund. That's huge. I mean,
it is a lot. We have now $14 billion under committed capital and of assets under management, and we have the fund 8 of the 2.6 you mentioned, and the special fund together with that on $1 billion as well, another $1 billion, that comes with partners such as
you start counting in zillions. It
costs a lot of money, but it's also. In this environment, it is a phenomenal sort of foundation to continue to innovate in this space.
Like, what do you think about, maybe you saw the Fabian fund that they just raised a bit over $1 billion, which for European fund is huge and starts to be in the similar ballgame. What do you think about them?
I mean, the more sort of capital we can get into life science, I think is just very positive, and adjacent areas of innovation. I think that's just positive, because that's what fuels, I think, our economy, and that just creates ourselves to be better humans as to what we can do differently and how we can build new ways of attacking problems, whether it's in medicine or it's in sustainability or
There's enough problems to solve.
There's enough of problems for everyone. Let's put it that way, for sure.
That's good. And I had a question yesterday from a London VC. I was telling him that we were on stage, and he asked a bit provocative question. Let's say, okay, but ask Lovisa, what were some other big returns except Moderna?
I would say that there are many different ones, and we also have, some count it only as returns. It's also what is medicines to patients. It's also partnerships. We do a lot of partnerships now. The Novo Nordisk, we have the Pfizer, we have the GSK. These are different ways of where we're almost creating what we call an innovation supply chain, so that companies that in big pharma, it's hard to do innovation as such, but this possibility of actually coming to us and looking at that breadth of different platforms that we have, and sort of almost do the matchmaking between these are the target product profiles that the company is truly after, and then being able to look into many of the different platform technologies and see which ones actually works the best for that problem, and then creating a collaboration around that. I think that's how you can really fast forward drug development. And what's good about that as well is that, each of these companies spend a lot of time refining their platforms and building the best platform possible. Through these collaborations, everyone in the company learns more about how to do drug development with a pharma company, for example. And you can tap into their depth of, for example, biology expertise in the particular area you're going after, which is otherwise hard to build in each of these different companies, which is why we formed this unit within Flagship, which is called Pioneering Medicines, which is basically a drug development unit within the Flagship ecosystem that allows all these different platform companies to have access to real world-class drug development expertise, as well as being almost like the adapter towards the big pharma world.
You centralize BD as well in a way, make it very much more efficient.
Yes. And instead, it's the same thing, that instead of every single platform company building their own BD function, their finance function, their legal function, we have those as central capabilities. So we can have very, very skilled folks in each of those groups. And then you have the possibility, even as a very small company, to work with very experienced people. And that's super helpful. People that have done it before. So it's a lot of, that's sort of part of the ecosystem process. For each of the companies, we recruit those scientists that are critical.
And on the returns, you didn't do returns. Yeah, some examples except Moderna. What was the homework?
I think we have, what is it now, 6 or I don't even, I don't want to quote numbers because I don't want to get the numbers wrong. But I think we have multiple different public companies that are out there right now, and the full sort of ecosystem of earlier companies that are coming through. Some that have been acquired within big companies, and a lot of partnerships as well.
Okay. I will have one more question, and then I will open up to any of you. So don't be shy. Prepare. You have time to prepare your question. One thing you mentioned was machine learning as well, and I think, you guys, and I read Nubar's post about the conversion of AI and biotech, and you're really going not full in, but like very actively. While I feel like of what I see in biotech, people are starting to understand, okay, what is it about, and starting to use it a bit. But at least, let's say, even in European biotech, why are you guys so bullish on it, so using it so much so early on it? Like, what's like?
I truly think that machine learning and AI is now in the place where you can revolutionize how we think about drug development.
Yeah.
And I mean, my background is in computational chemistry. So really, I feel like back in the late 1990s, no, we coded algorithm. We used neural networks. We used quantum chemistry. I literally coded the algorithms to build those biological, the algorithms to describe biological scenarios. So we used all those different tools. And that's when there was no infrastructure to do so. You had to partition your hard drive to get the Linux running. There were no clusters. You had to build those clusters. It's like you had to do everything yourself. And I had to generate my own data to build my models and parameterize my algorithms. So it's like that was not a time where you could have massive impact, yet some of the softwares we developed are still in the market 20 years later, so that's good. But now I think if you think about some of the pre-trained models, the GPTs of the world, you think about some of the reasoning layers that are starting to come out, Strawberry, one, etc. And then I think now is the time where we can really start with subject matter expertise, build cognitive applications and literally using the combination of our deep knowledge in biology and drug development and leverage the advances in machine learning and artificial intelligence. Building knowledge graphs, using large language models to compile the totality of data, using molecular modeling to rapidly get to novel therapeutics. Now is a time where I think we both have the data, we have the algorithm, we have the compute, we can bring it all together to drug development can easily be quite subjective. You figure out this is what I want to do, and then you do everything to prove that you're right, as opposed to being much more holistic, using these tools and being able to reduce it down to from a almost like probabilistic perspective. If there is a solution, we should have the highest probability of actually finding it. And I think that's what's exciting me.
Also the blind spots when you're on the subject thinking.
Exactly. And I think that's super exciting. I think that's where we want to be. And then you have to make the investments to learn more about it and really try out it in multiple different settings so that you understand the powers and how to interact so that you get towards, I would say, augmented intelligence, where you get the best out of the human intelligence and the best out of the machine intelligence, and you bring it together into something that is so much better than each of the individual parts.
Yeah, I like that. Like that a lot. Maybe if some of you have a question, I think there's a mic somewhere. Here, yeah, there. From Misha. You had a question? Yeah? No, yeah, there. Perfect.
Hi. So I wanted to ask, we talk a lot about, returns. I think one question I have, Lovisa, is beyond returns, financial returns. What do you define? What is success to Flagship with the startups you have? And what do you think is a good return or a good success rate outside of returns?
For me, what's most important is that, and for Flagship, I would say, is to make a stand, make a difference, create value to patients. I think that is where you truly generate returns. And you can do that in many different ways. Let me give you one example, which is, for example, Alltrna, which is the tRNA company that we created, which is about how can we create universal solutions to rare genetic diseases. Rare genetic diseases, ultra rare diseases has just been, no one is really going there, or they're going to very few specific diseases. And if we would actually develop drugs towards all of the 10,000 different of diseases, it would take hundreds of years before we would get them through to marketed products. So I think one example of what's meaningful is where we say, what if we could find universal solutions to rare genetic diseases? What if we could pull together and bundle many different rare or ultra-rare genetic diseases that share the same genetic mutation? Then we could use a single medicine to start treating thousands of different rare and ultra-rare genetic diseases. I think that's a vision that is truly creating value for humanity, because no one will otherwise be focusing on each of those different diseases. So that's just one example of how the tRNA, which is a very unique modality, transfer RNA, which is literally, it's a tRNA that reads the code on the mRNA to understand what amino acid to put on the growing polypeptide chain. So it's literally the physical link between the mRNA and the protein. So if there is no tRNA, it would just never be a protein. And then we came up with this, you have a genetic code. If you do a single mutation, you go from coding for an amino acid to coding for a stop. We don't have to think about at what gene it is or flanking regions. Independent of what gene, you can use that same tRNA towards for example, premature stop codon to get towards that edited protein so that you restore the full-length protein. And that's then a solution that is unique in its ability to go after diseases that otherwise will be completely ignored. So I think that's just an example of what's value to me, truly.
So firstly, thank you for the discussion. And I have two questions. The first one is, so I come from an institute in Paris, and we try to build startups with the knowledge developed by academia and by researchers. So what is your opinion on those spin-offs from the academia? How can we help them grow? What will be your advice as a person who also helps, building projects and bringing them further? That's my first question. And then the second one is more not personal, but as a woman, how do you see being as the head of such an organization, and what advices would you give to somebody, a woman, for example, a young woman, for example, wanting to begin something like this? Yeah. So I have two questions.
Yep. So let's start with the one with regards to the startup in the academic settings and how to think about that. And I think that, what I would say is really try to surround yourselves with people that have done it before and have a lot of knowledge in the space, and really trying to get as much advice as ever possible, because it's not going to be easy, right? And you probably know that as well. And it takes a lot of tenacity to sort of push it forward and continue to believe in it when sometimes it goes up and sometimes it goes down. But it's really by bringing the best people around you that I think that and getting yourself into a environment where you have also access to capital, and you really you work with people you want to work with, because it's a long journey from the very start to something. But let me spend a little bit more time on the diversity question, because I think that is a really important one. And how can we bring diversity to every aspect of life, but also in the value creation or in the company creation setting, and to the senior positions more generally. And I think it's you have to, for me, it's a lot about now to just not accept that it is in a certain way, and it's hard to recruit women or so. For one company like Alltrna, we just made a thing out of, we're not going to have a recruitment firm that won't bring 50-50 when it comes to candidates. And there were many we had to say no to because they said they couldn't bring 50-50 when it comes to diversity. And it's then you just have to say no, because that's not good enough. If you put a little bit more effort into it, you will find, because there's a ton of talent out there. The benefit then is that when you start to bring in more diversity, you're opening up massive talent pools, and everyone, they know someone else and they know someone else. And that's how you can then start to build those much more diverse systems. And it's the same thing as with science. We say we want collaboration because we want different sort of mindsets. That's how we drive innovation. And it's the same when you're driving a company, because it's just how people can bring different views to the table. It's the same mechanism. It just makes it better because everyone is more challenged. And then you have to find your right environments. And I would say Flagship has always been super supportive in, really trying to find as diverse and as environment as possible, so that you get the best ideas out of it. So we need to put work towards it. And then I think that's when you can talk about return actually being, very, very instrumental.
And you think as an individual, as a young woman in biotech, a bit, if I hear what you're saying, is also like go find supportive environment or supportive companies or supportive people who will support diversity.
Yeah, and then pay it forward. So that, for example, now when I recruit CEOs for my companies, I always keep diversity as one of my highest criteria, because I also know that they probably needed to work harder than most others to get to the positions where they are. And that's the kind of grit you also need to build and lead a company. So I think it sort of just brings it all together.
Nice. I remember Alltrna, I saw the press release and I saw you were 3 women, the founding team, which is pretty, I think I've never seen that in the biotech.
And you'll see more of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's good. Great question. Maybe one more question. It's great you have so many questions. I think it makes it more interactive, right?
Hello. Very interesting to hear that you have a computational chemistry background. Just curious, what's your opinion on some of the barriers or blockers that are sort of preventing the translation of in silico modeling to wet lab execution and then into the clinic?
So the question is how going from the computational to the translation sciences and actually bringing the medicines that we design all the way into the clinic and how we can make that faster, I assume is in part of that as well. I think that's a great question. And so first of all, I think it's a lot about creating less barriers between each of the different disciplines. I think we've started to become good at designing molecules from the more computational chemistry perspective. And what we now need to, and it comes back a little bit to what we discussed before with regards to subject matter expertise and cognitive applications to lie on top of some of these new tools that are there. How can we start to simulate every step of that process from the actual target identification all the way through to basically the PK/PD simulations, and then creating frameworks that also regulatory agencies will start to become comfortable with. And I'll give you an example. For example, in Apriori Bio, which is in variant resilient vaccines, that is a lot about how do we design vaccines that elicit an antibody repertoire that is protective both today but also towards future variants. We built the Octavia, an AI biology platform that allows us to identify what are the different mutations that if they would occur, we would not be protected towards them anymore. And then we design vaccines or antigens that allows us, with those mutations, that allows us then to elicit an antibody repertoire that is protected in the future. But that comes with a challenge as to you don't know what's actually going to happen, and how do you then early on build models and proof point them with real world data so that you can showcase that over, as we've done there, 18 months, our vaccine was able to better protect towards emerging variants than standard of care. And by constantly sort of building models and proving using real-world data that it's actually working, I think that's how we can start to also create more of a confidence with the world that machine learning and model making is actually, and predictive design more generally, is something that will fast forward drug development in a very effective way.
Good question. Maybe one more if someone has one. Yeah.
Hi, Louisa. Line Galler from Women in Life Science Denmark, and I can completely relate to what you say regarding diversity in top management and boards. But my question is a bit different. So what can we learn? What can we in Europe learn from the way that you in US generate these viable biotech companies? Of course, there's much more capital available in the US, but the way that you have been great success with forming all these successful biotech companies, and there is a translational gap in Europe, translating scientific innovations into medicines for patients. So what are your, top 3 things that we can learn from US there?
It's a very good question. And I think, going back to where we started with regards to collaboration, how do we bring the 2 ecosystems closer to each other? I think that's one way of also sort of starting to establish an infrastructure or an ecosystem that allows us to tap into maybe capital from one side of the pond to innovation on the other side, etc., and bring that together. Same thing with talent exchange, because I think that in the US system, there has been more of building your dream, building the companies, and how can we, by also exchanging talent, bringing more of that also maybe to other ecosystems around the world as well. And I think finally it's finding partners that truly have also capital available and showcasing good examples where additional capital actually creates better final solutions. I think there is something about creating broader ecosystems also from a capital raise perspective, because capital will be important in order to bring these companies forward. And I think the best I can offer at that, because it's a hard task in that many aspects, but I think it's more about how we can actually collaborate and make it sort of a global scene, as opposed to making it the European scene or the US scene or the Asia scene, and instead thinking about it, global problems needs global solutions, let's work on them together.
Great question. I think also, like as you said, crossing the ecosystem, I think as a European, spending some time in Boston or in the Valley, learning from what the lessons were there. And I think also, I remember on the show we had Otello from Omega, and he has a European background as well. And he was saying every time he invests in a European company, one of the requirements is the CEO needs to spend time in Boston very early on and have a presence. And I think
it's like being around those who have already done it. I think that is another piece to it as well, because then it just makes it easier to see, okay, they were able to overcome that. If they could do it, then I can do that too, right?
That's a good one. And actually, I had a question on LinkedIn. There was a question similar to your question as well. The last question was, how do you bridge the gap between company creation, or the amount of company creation in the US versus Europe?
It's a big question, and I think it comes back to what we talked about. How do we bring them together? How do we make it easier to exchange ideas, capital, talent, and finding places where we can unite around certain types of science that we're all passionate about, and use that to build.
And I guess there's things also beyond biotech. The US, for when I was studying, I learned a lot from there. It's just so entrepreneurial culture, which is deep from hundreds of years ago, which is much stronger than, let's say, in Europe, where we had some entrepreneurs, and we still have, and it's growing actually pretty fast, but there's a delta.
Yes, and I think that the universities, they are good in actually teaching entrepreneurship, and they are good in actually sort of bringing the competences together into an ecosystem. When I did the MBA over at MIT, we had a lot of just entrepreneurship. How do you interact with the ecosystem? How do you build bridges? How do you bring things together? How do you create your own startup? That was part of the curriculum. And I think that also helps, and bringing people from the outside. That's how I met Nubarafeh for the first time, our founder of Flagship, because he came and talked about entrepreneurship and how he had sort of built that process at Flagship. And that's actually what made me leave the 85,000 people big pharma to go to 4 people small biotech and try that out, because it was just exciting to hear someone who's thought so deeply about how to actually create companies in a way that I had not heard before articulate.
Makes me laugh because I remember when I was in Boston, I chose to not do a PhD, and then I met so many PhDs who were like so entrepreneurial, and they would like take a 1-2 year break to try a startup, go back to the PhD, and I was like, wow, this sounds like
it is a good place. It's a very good growing ground for that. It's so many different startups around there, which makes it
Kendall Square. I think for anyone in the room, if you haven't visited, I think it's worth the trip. Maybe just switching a bit topic to more your personal journey. As I said, I wanted to cover this as well. I mean, we mentioned it here and there. You grew up in Sweden. You studied here, master's, PhD. You started your career here, and then you moved to the US. Can you talk a bit on some of your lessons there in the earlier stage of your career?
I started off doing what was an industrial PhD, and looking back, it was actually quite innovative and very forward-thinking in how can we use in silico methodologies to actually bridge between biology and chemistry. And this is like late 1990s. It's like 5 years after we probably sent our first emails. That's when we said that we were actually going to do this computationally. And I think that is already from the very beginning, being in an environment with a lot of support and a lot of very talented people, as well as coming back to the question on equality. I mean, it is a very diverse. It was as many, I would say, female as male role models that I had throughout many of these first years, which I think is a great foundation for then always wanting to build diverse teams. But also a lot of teamwork, which, innovation is a team sport. I think that's how we call it at Flagship, because it's really, you need everyone to chime in order to make it constantly better. And that's, I would say, the Swedish upbringing was very strong on it's all a team sport. And I think that's one of those.
What's the word again? The collective of an individual. That you have a Swedish word for that, not like the concept.
Well, we like the long word, but that's not the one you're thinking about. No, I can't think of the word that you're thinking about right now, but it's definitely that you bring it all together. I'm looking at South Wales here to get some help, but how we bring it all together and sort of that team spirit and consensus is one. I think that's the consensus word, which is very strong sort of also in the Swedish. And it doesn't mean that you don't challenge each other. But it's more about that you listen to all the different opinions around the table, and then you sort of bring that next step to it.
Nice. And you spent, as you said, quite some time in big pharma. You were at AstraZeneca, at Pfizer, and then how was that transition out of big pharma to
the small biotech, the 85,000 to the 4? It was quite different, I would say. What you do learn is that you have to, and that I think is something that I learned also during my PhD and all of that, you need to be able to tap in and contribute to many, many different areas. In big pharma, you easily get quite sort of, this is my area of expertise, this is where I primarily are contributing. Going into the 4 people, it's like if you don't do it yourself, no one else is going to do it either. So it's like it's more about really sort of digging into each of the different problems, and also be very focused on what you choose to put your time on, because there are so many. You need to know in drug development
too many things.
You need to know all the different things you could do, and that's why 15 years in big pharma was a very good training for how you need to do drug development. But you can't do everything in the small startup. But you need to think very, very, very cognizantly about what are the few things that really matters, and that you should put a lot of effort making it as good as ever possible. And there will be other things that are not as critical to get you from A to C that you may have to take lighter touch at because you're only 4 people. But also you can complement them afterwards. So it's much, I would say it takes a lot of strategic thinking as to what really matters when.
Yeah.
And be very sort of efficient with your resources.
Yeah. I like that. That's actually a bit segue, but one topic I wanted to touch base on was, I think a flagship, you're also especially good from a talent perspective to attract some top level, top executives, some pharma, bring them in as entrepreneur residents or venture partner, and then they're running some companies. Can you talk, I guess it's similar.
I think that has made Flagship such a more mature organization as well, because I think in we are making medicines to patients, and you need to have a strong expertise, and you need to sort of connect that platform knowledge, platform building with the drug development process to similarly set the compasses right from the first place. Where do you have the greatest unmet need? What are the target product profiles you actually want to go after? And then by working together with those that have done it over and over and over across modalities, across disease areas, across companies, across all those different interfaces, and work very, very closely with them to triage down where should you focus a particular platform towards? What are the different value pools that you should unlock with that platform? Because that's where that platform will bring the greatest value.
I like that. I would have one more question, and then I would open up again if some of you have more questions. One thing I think that we talked about, you mentioned your MBA at MIT. How did you come to the decision to move to Boston actually? And like, I think it must be a difficult decision.
So sometimes it's these, when things happen that you hadn't planned for, that can be a pretty good decision driver. So I was working with AstraZeneca in Södertälje, and the site closed down. And I could have the possibility to continue maybe at AstraZeneca in Mölndal, where I had...
Like green enough for biotech.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay.
So then that gave me a chance to sort of reflect over what I wanted to do next. If I wanted to continue what I was doing, I started off as CEO for a small biotech in Sweden, in the Karolinska development environment. And then I got recruited to Pfizer in the US. And it was just one of those, it was an opportunity. Had a very young family, and we're like, okay, let's give it a try. Let's see, let's do it. And if that wouldn't have happened before, I would probably, very likely, maybe I would still be in Sweden and still working with the same company, because it wasn't so that I've always enjoyed each of those different phases that I've been in. So it's never so, it's just the desire to actually do something different that drives you to take on this, and not being afraid of trying something new. And I think that goes along all the different things that we do, just not being afraid of trying.
Yeah, and open to opportunities.
Open to opportunities. Just know that, you won't be best at it from the very beginning, but you can truly learn it if you want to.
Yeah. And can you talk about the MBA a bit? Like, why the decision to make an MBA? I think you made it while you were at Pfizer.
I did.
And I think it's also, doing an MBA in the US as a European is a quite good way also of learning, of being exposed to the ecosystem. As you said, meeting great people like Nuba who lecture at MIT.
So actually, the decision to take an MBA came actually when I was CEO of a small biotech in Sweden, because that's when I realized that I come from a complete sort of scientific background, PhD, master science. It was all sort of drug development. And now here I was as a CEO and needed to take many other decisions that were much more strategic, much more business oriented than when you're a pure scientist and such. And when I then joined Pfizer, I asked if I could just continue to do that development while there. And I think it did open up a lot new perspectives, because first of all, you learn the theory behind how you think about value creation and value capture, which are both very important aspects of company creation, right? And being able to do that in a innovation system such as MIT really is, just gave me exposure much more to that external biotech world. And I've always been interested in the totality. I like the systems thinking about company creation. So it was a natural step in that sense.
Okay, nice. We'll open up for, I think, 1 or 2 more questions. All right. Then I have some. So then I will finish with some quick questions or quick fire.
Wow.
Just yes, no, or one sentence.
Okay.
One sentence answer. What's on the top of your mind at the moment?
What's going to be the next big innovation in biotech? I think that's something one can always think about. And it's good when you're traveling because it gives you time. That was not a one sentence, but it does give you time to think. Yes.
What's your favorite biotech book?
My favorite biotech book. You know what I like, which is not a biotech book? Born to Run, which is not about biotech at all, but it's about how Born to Run.
Okay.
How just by you find yourself, you grow up in a certain environment, just makes something natural. And I think that's a lot around also company creation. Find yourself in the right environment, because if you can do so, then you automatically just don't see the barriers, but you see that it's a natural thing to do.
What's your favorite biotech hub in Europe?
In Europe, I'm born in Gothenburg, so I think I should say Gothenburg.
Even with the AstraZeneca site who closed?
Absolutely. It was a fantastic time of my life.
One mistake you made over the past 12 months?
Over the past 12 months, probably very many. Very
Tough
many.
one.
It's a tough one. I probably should have spent more time thinking on big problems, and oftentimes it's easy to get, operational because you have to do it, but you have to sort of manage your time so that you always save time for thinking.
Save time for thinking. I like
Save
that.
time for thinking. Yeah.
Your favorite European biotech?
European biotech.
Yeah. Or one of the one that struck.
One of the.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say, as we discussed before, BioArctic, because it's a lot of my own colleagues that are working there, and I think they've done a really good job.
Nice. We recorded the episode yesterday with Gunilla, so will come out as well. How much do you sleep per night?
6 hours.
Wow.
But I do it every night.
Yeah.
I try to be very sort of stringent on that.
That's nice. What's the most impressive drug on the market at the moment?
I think that the vaccines during COVID were impressive drugs under what circumstances they were developed, and leveraging a completely new technology to meet an unprecedented, unmet need. I think that's impressive.
Yeah, at the crazy speed.
At the crazy speed, under crazy circumstances. Yep.
Nice one. And last question, one of your biotech heroes, if possible, a European.
Possible European. I mean, I would say, I think Nubarafein, who is the founder of Flagship, he's been at this for 25 years, and it's very inspirational to work in such an environment because you always learn something. I think there are a lot of fantastic founders and entrepreneurs in Europe as well. It's harder for me to choose a single one, but I have a lot of role models in Europe.
Nice. Great. Thanks a lot for the conversation, Lovisa. Please,
thank you.
Big round of applause for her. I really enjoyed this experiment on stage and would be curious to hear what you think. So please leave me a comment below or anywhere you are, or shoot me an email at philip@flot.bio. I'm impressed by how good Flagship is at company building. I'm also impressed by Lovisa's clarity on machine learning and AI, as well as her Swedish humility combined with a Bostonian drive and ambition. If you've also enjoyed this episode, please hit the like, follow, review button. Any of these actions would help a lot to give more people access to the show. If you want to see similar videos, please feel free to check out our channel where we have many more. All right, that's it for now. Thanks for listening to the end and see you in the next episode.